Hi, everybody. Welcome to our webinar today. My name is Bobby Carlton. I'm the founder of Innovation Women. I'm also the publisher and editor-in-chief of Lioness Magazine. I'm going to be getting things started in just a moment. I want to give people a chance to come in and get settled. If this was a physical event, what we would be doing is all finding our seats and getting settled in for the conversation. So welcome everyone, and giving it just a moment while everybody comes in and gets started. So hold on one second. All righty. I think that that is enough of waiting time for today. And welcome everybody. This is the first in our webinars for the Woman-Led Workplace Advantage, creating work-life balance. And today we're here with Kathryn Poehling Seymour. She is the CEO and president of First Supply. Excuse me. Um, as I mentioned, this is the first in our series, and we do have a couple of these webinars scheduled. So the next one coming up is Woman-Led Workplace Advantage, Designing Meaningful Work. And we have some fantastic people who are with us next month. That will be Tuesday, March 18th. And our team is putting a link in the chat if you're interested in RSVPing for that session. And then we are moving on to April, again, talking about designing meaningful work. We are talking about, whoops, let's go back here. April 14th, we have another session, and that will also give you a link in the chat so you can join that event as well. So we're really excited about the top woman-led workplaces program and the ability to work with these absolutely incredible companies who are sharing their knowledge with us and our readership. And we also have upcoming March networking with all of the members of Lioness Magazine. You are invited as well. We are doing a second podcasting edition. We'll be talking about people's favorite, most useful podcasts. We'll be also making connections for folks that are interested in podcast guesting. We have a number of podcasters who will be showing up for that. That is on Tuesday, March 4th, and that is also something that you can RSVP for. That link will be in the chat. And our next webinar coming up later on this month, Thursday, February 27th, When the Math Ain't Matching. The Art of Selling Anything with Precious Williams. That will be from 2 to 3, Thursday, the 27th of February. And again, link in the chat to RSVP to that particular event. And as always, feel free to join us. Come and join our community of female entrepreneurs. You'll be able to network with other entrepreneurs, increase your visibility with a listing in our woman-owned business directory, and access all of the amazing resources and tools that we have from Lioness Magazine. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention that next Wednesday, we have a fantastic webinar with Stephanie Carton from Entreprenista. This is an Innovation Women webinar, and maybe some of you remember Stephanie from one of the Lioness Magazine webinar sessions that we did on building community. So Innovation Women is our sponsor and our sister company. So if you are interested in public speaking, you can access lists of hundreds of calls for speakers through Innovation Women. And if you're interested in public speaking yourself, building out your speaker profile, and if you are an event manager, this is a great place to access information and get direct connections to awesome speakers who just happen to be women. Innovation Women event managers use the platform for free, and speakers pay just $159 a year to get access to all that Innovation Women offers. So check it out. So, all of those ads out of the way, I think everybody is ready to jump right in today. So, thank you, Katie, for joining us today, and so excited to have you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here. And thank you for all of your work, really giving a voice to women in business.
Well, it is so incredibly important. Speaking of which, I would just love to read everybody a little bit more about you. So, you are the fifth generation president and CEO of First Supply. And that's a 127-year-old family business specializing in plumbing, HVAC, waterworks distribution, and you've served as the chair for the American Supply Association, the largest industry association, and proud co founder of their Women in Industry division. Thank you for your service. You were recognized as a Biz Times Wisconsin 275 most influential business leaders, a Family Business Magazine CEO to watch for 2024. So, lots of accolades for you and welcome. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about yourself and your business.
Sure. Again, thank you for having me. It's always fun to be able to tell our story. We're so proud of it. You shared the highlights, our 127-year history. I've spent the last couple of weeks traveling to all of our locations and reaffirming our story and talking about a really big project that we're doing, the largest project in our company history, honestly, that's going to really recast our future and how we view innovation and some really exciting things. But it's been fun to visit all of our 53 locations, talk to all 701 of our employees. It's been a lot of fun. I didn't start in the business necessarily. My father instituted a rule, so to speak, that we have to work outside the business for 5 years before we come back. And some of that was the fact he never had a boss beside a family member, really, or someone at the business. He didn't ever have that experience outside the business. And him and my uncle started to realize that we were able to go out and gain new skills and see new things and bring some of that back to the business. It's somewhat self-serving in that the business is really benefited by that. So my cousin-in-law, who's our CFO, he and I both had that experience. So the other thing that it affords us is that we want to come back. We have an established career path that we're already on, and our desire to come back to the family business isn't an obligation. It's something we're interested in where the business is going, and we want to give back and we want to be part of it. So that's been a great journey for me. I'm a tax attorney by education, so totally different kind of train of thought. But today, I really enjoy being able to do things like this and to participate in our industry and really across our communities, especially. I'm very involved in the Go Red for Women movement here in Southeast Wisconsin. I live in Milwaukee. And a big reason I feel so strongly about all these things and do all these things is that I have three small children, a 5-year-old daughter and a 4-year-old twin. So they're three young women looking at what we're doing and are really counting on us to pave the way for them, just like we can stand on the shoulders of those women who came before us.
Oh, that's great. And actually, your company is really one of the winners of the Woman Led Top Workplaces Award for 2024. And a big aspect of that is having some excellent work-life balance. And I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about how you define work-life balance. It sounds like you've got a lot going on in your personal life.
Yes.
That's a lot of kids under the age of 5.
Yes, it is. My husband and I joke that we had 3 children under 2 years old longer than it's appropriate.
Yes.
But I'm gonna turn you on your head a little bit, and in my belief about work-life balance is I don't think it exists. I talk about work-life balance as a blend. And it's something, actually, it's one of the things that I bring back from my experience at Deloitte. Deloitte had this phenomenal um, women's organization. They were one of the early people to have this type of, it was a global group, and it was a brown bag lunch type situation where you brought your lunch and you sat in the conference room with other women at the firm. And they have speakers and they talk about things. Sometimes we read a book and did things. And it's truly a pivotal moment in my career. And we had one speaker who talked about dialing life up and down. And she talked about there are times when you have to work 60 hours a week and your career is dialed way up. And your family life might be dialed way down because you can't be 60% at everything. You have to give and take. And her message was really it's give and take. And that's where I think I started to form my belief about this blend. And I really didn't understand it until I had children, but it doesn't take children to identify this. It was just my inflection point. There happened to be so. And really what threw fuel to the fire on that is it was COVID. I had a 1-year-old and newborn twins. And unfortunately, my father had a stroke, which accelerated our succession plan. So I took over the business in the midst of all of this and realized that I couldn't do all these things. But I had a lot of tools and resources that could help me do these things as we built our leadership team. One of the most amazing things that happened is as I had these small children, then my parents were able to step in and help with them. And so our blend became different. I'd go to their house and have breakfast and download everything my father had been thinking about. It was part of my training, part of my onboarding. Dad, what would you do in this situation? And then they could help me with the children, and I could do a couple conference calls and move on. So it just became this blended work family situation. I know that's a very unique situation. Not everyone has that luxury, but it was really just about me using the tools in front of me.
Absolutely. And it sounds like your point of view also evolved from, the Deloitte days, young parent days, and then taking over the business.
Yep, very much.
Absolutely. So, can we get into a little bit about the role that CEOs and leaders play in shaping a company culture? Are you changing the company culture with your role today from what it had been and how you're supporting that work-life balance?
Yeah, I think there's two things when we think about the expectations of leaders and CEOs, and when we think about the reality um, and what's realistic. The leaders in any business need to set the example. And it's really important the messaging and the communication behind that example. In the situation I was just explaining, I returned to work really quickly after my twins were born. But again, I had the tools to be able to do that. And I really worried about what example that set for the business. Did other young women feel, well, that's what our CEO's expectation is, I'd better do that too. And that's really not the case. It's just the situation was the reality I was in versus the expectation that maybe someone else would have had for me. So it's really hard to thread that needle. But the only way to do that is communication. And so I tell my story about why that return to work made sense for me. And again, the things that made it possible so that people understand it's not an expectation. But we really need to make sure that we're creating the space also to promote and celebrate that balance. So one of the things I've tried to be cognizant of is people who are doing it well. Maybe there's somebody who and I talk a lot about children, but I really need to give the caveat. It can be a caretaker of anything. It can be a parent, it could be a neighbor, it could be a friend that you find yourself in a caretaking role, or it can simply be the mental, physical health space you need to be a well-balanced human. You may not have any of those caretaking responsibilities, but those things are important. So is there someone who's creating space in their life or doing something that's helpful that then we can share their story if they're willing, highlight in the employee newsletter or just calling them out and saying, thank you for what you're doing, telling their manager, hey, I see you. I see what your team is doing. I see you've created this space. So I think leaders can do the things in small ways that don't always make it about them. My example is important, but the examples of my teams and everyone around us, our communities are just as important as well.
Yeah, and I think that open communication that were just talking about is really important in terms of promoting balance, not just as a policy, but discussing like how it actually evolves and works for your employees. We had a similar situation here in the Boston area where the Boston mayor had her third child and was literally like back at work within a few days. And, is that setting up a realistic expectation for other people because she had support to be able to do that?
Right. Being a mayor, you can't really turn it on and off, right? It's just some
A little bit.
roles just you don't, and you know that taking the role, right? She ran for mayor knowing that this was an all-encompassing job, but
Yeah.
it is hard to have a policy that then maybe a leader doesn't abide by because of the reality of their role. So yeah, policy is important, but it's about balance, it's about blend. So policy needs to evolve with that too.
So, one of the things that we consider so important here at Lioness is getting down into the details a little bit. Like, we're talking about what are the concrete policies or initiatives that your company has implemented to promote that better balance or not balance?
Or blend.
Yes, the blend. What kinds of real concrete specific things are you doing?
Um, a lot of things around benefits, and that's also had to be an evolution because it's really nice to say, okay, we're going to start giving everybody, paid leave and all these, time off and all and a whole bunch of promotion of all these things, but there's a financial obligation to that too. And one of our responsibilities as leaders is to ensure our business is an ongoing concern, right? We've got to make sure we're making a good decision for our teams and their balance, but the fiscal responsibility as well. So what we've done is chosen to make incremental steps all the time. One of the other mantras I live by is do what you can when you can with what you have. It doesn't have to be a wholesale change for anything. It can be small little steps that make a big difference. So we've added paternity leave days, or I think we call them paternity leave, but again, they can be adoption days as well. We have, so if family adopts a child, that's another benefit we have. We've changed the number of days between our short-term disability leave so that people are able to have more time covered while they're waiting for short-term disability to kick in. So some of the things that can alleviate the financial burden to someone and make sure they've got the time and space away from work when they need it the most. Um, One of the other things that we've done from a real policy standpoint, it is remote work. I think you probably want to talk about that a little bit too, but for remote work, we actually, this is one of the things my father had the ability to think uh, weeks ahead. We would be thinking about what was going to go on next month, and he'd be thinking about next year. He's just really truly visionary that way. And he saw kind of what was starting to happen in COVID and realized that our remote work, we had no policy. It was just, if you ask, you kind of will figure it out. So we put together a remote work policy at the end of January of 2020, which is just crazy. So we had something in place. We had a couple people on it who already had remote work situations, but we were able to put something together that now we can use forever. There are lots of reasons why people need to temporarily or for a longer term work remotely, or it's a better situation for them. We've been able to retain some employees because maybe they're in one case I can think of, their family situation changed and they needed to relocate with a spouse. Really high performing, phenomenal employee. And we said, okay, let's figure this out. We're going to use our remote work policy so that you can stay with your family, but yet can continue to contribute to First Supply. So thinking outside the box and some of those things has been really important.
Yeah, and I think you started to get into a little bit the balance in terms of being flexible on the business side, but you also still need to ensure productivity. So, like, how are you balancing that? Is there a place where you say, you know what, this is no longer working for us as a business? Or is there a place where it's like we're gonna push this to make sure that our employees get what they need? Like, how do you balance those two things?
This is a place that our management teams are critically important. We're pretty a spread out workforce. We have 701 people, but it's across 53 locations. So in some locations there's a single person or just a handful of people. And so obviously that person can't just decide to work remotely for a month because it's not going to work out. But our managers do a phenomenal job of knowing their teams and knowing what people need when and when they can flex up and down. Something I'm so proud of, I was talking about visiting all of our locations and just it's always so energizing to me because I feel the spirit of the business. It sounds a little cheesy, but at the same time, the people who just like being with each other and they like what they do, they like taking care of their customers. That's the critical thing that's our North Star is really, can we take care of our customers? If you the person decide to go work or need to do this and your team needs to cover for you, what's that impact to the customer going to be and then to the rest of the team? So really making sure that we've got the coverage we need. We, while we're spread out geographically, we can use our teams differently too. I live in the Milwaukee area and we've got 3 kitchen and bath stores here. And we've had, I think, 3 maternity leaves in the last year, and people are moving between stores to help each other out and make sure that there's coverage and design capabilities that meet the needs of the customers across those 3 stores at any given time. So that everybody can have the flexibility and space that they need. So it really comes back to the people. The managers are critical in knowing that. And so leadership empowering the managers to be able to make those decisions for their teams.
Nice. And by the way, folks, we have a nice size audience here today. If you have a question for Katie, please use the Q&A function. Drop your question in and I will ask. And speaking of which, Katie, we already have some questions popping up even before I invited people. So we're going to jump in on a couple of these.
Sure.
These look terrific. Alexandra is wondering about your opinion about home office. Can we trust as a CEO that the employees will do their work efficiently at home? And what should be the role of the CEO in this case to avoid people losing the communication between each other, avoiding performance decline? That wouldn't even be seen because there's something that's not even a comparison of performance if everybody would be on site.
Right.
So there's a lot that goes into that. Can you address that?
Yeah, so when I talked about our policy, we have the employee and their manager sign a contract and they have to sign it annually so that they have to review it and go back and say, is this still working for us? Is this still needed? Or should we think about this differently? And it's we use Dayforce, so it's something that's in their employee file and they have to sign it electronically and the HR VP of HR has to sign it. So not that she needs to be in the weeds on all those agreements, but she'll know if something's going on and she should push a manager to say, are you sure that team member should still be working remotely or should you be thinking about something else? So we've got, we try to have accountability in that process and visibility in that process. So it's something that, oh yeah, we signed that 10 years ago and we kind of forgot that person is over there and what do we need to do? So tightened up that in what's going on there. And then each manager is asked to have some sort of process with their teams. I mean, really, everybody built their muscle on this in COVID, right? But if each department manager was allowed to set the policy for their team. So for example, our e-commerce team, there's a strong remote workforce. But every Wednesday they're in the office. That's set by the director of e-com. And so he can manage his team. That's what works for them. And then he's got an accountability standpoint of tell me what you did every Friday, tell me if you met these objectives. And then Monday, his managers meet with their team. This is what we need to accomplish this week. And then on Friday, hey, did we do it? And then they have a full team meeting on Wednesdays. But that's not true for other departments. Say we're going to be Monday, Wednesday, Friday, we're going to be in the office, things like that. We honestly have very few full remote work anymore. Most people are really back to the office. But from an accountability standpoint, again, it's back to the people and the manager. As CEO, I can't know what all those things are, but I like to be informed so that I can bring best practices back with me. I'm seeing what other companies are doing. Maybe they've got a really good idea that's working for them and I can bring that back. Or if there's something that's not working, sometimes I have the visibility to push, right? To say, you know what, that doesn't sound right. Are you sure that that's what we should be doing? Are you sure? Let's think about this harder. or help departments share best practices between each other. So we can have that visibility throughout, externally, internally, and then promote the communications.
That actually gets into a little bit of the next question that's here from Karen, asking what kind of power do you give your managers to create or support the blend of productivity and growth? And what's your take on employee responsibility to the business collectively versus individually?
That's a meaty question. So,
Yeah.
and all of this goes without saying, we have financial economic KPIs that have to be met, and we track people's in our customer service, we track number of calls, length of calls, sales, all those types of things. We've got an outside sales force. We also have a warehousing sales force. We're in distribution, and you can't pick an order from home. You have that's got to be done on site, and we have productivity measures there as well. So we have, and then we have productivity measures in our what we call shared services. So again, that's our e-com, that's our HR, finance, accounting, all of those um, roles where we're making sure that we're getting the work done and the work we need done. Um, the other really important part of all of this is we deepened our senior leadership communications and meetings. We now have 3 meetings a year where our senior leadership team is getting together. And that's my team, my executive team, and then their direct report. So all of our directors and district regional managers, that group of people. And we broadened that group so that we could have even more sharing and communications up and down the board and bring the accountability. Then they can bring their accountability into their regions and districts and branches to be able to empower their teams when they can, or unempower their teams if it's not working, right? They can get pretty involved.
Excellent. So, our next question from Hope is saying, what do you say the difference is between your leadership style comparing to a typical male leader, including your father and I guess grandfather? What gives us women advantages?
Um, that's also a great question. I think there's a couple things going on. There's generational leadership as well. You mentioned I was the chairman of our industry association. I was actually the second female, but I was the youngest person.
Mm.
So that's another generational difference that I think is important to be cognizant of. Um, but I think women have all of the obviously all the attributes that any male does. But sometimes I truly think, and this is probably a controversial thing to say, but sometimes we just think differently. And we just have a perspective that's not the same. It's not wrong. It's not better. It's just different. And I think the juxtaposition of the perspectives is what makes a woman-led organization stand out. There could be bad female leaders just as much as there can be bad male leaders, right? We've probably experienced them, unfortunately. So you still have to have the building blocks of credibility of being a strong leader, but the viewpoint is where things can get interesting, I think. I don't think when I think about my dad's leadership style, and I would count him as a phenomenal leader. He was a strong industry leader, um, really supportive of so many people, phenomenal ideas, just all in all, great leader. But he had a different set of tools than I did. So I have a different approach than he did. He took a leadership role when I was a young child, so he had that same young parenting perspective that I do, but our business was also different. Our business was only a handful of locations. He grew our business exponentially when I was a young adult. And so that is also, I've stepped into a role in a very different organization than the organization he led also.
I think you're very smart to point out generational differences as well for you, in particular with your grandfather and father, being ahead of you on the curve. I would imagine that generational difference is a big one. You're even today, women are still more likely to be responsible for kids in home. And, I can imagine that might have been a little bit different for your family members who were in the same role you were in.
Right.
Yeah. Let's get back into the work that your company is doing around work-life balance initiatives. Are there key metrics or KPIs that your company is using to evaluate the success of these initiatives?
So from a KPI standpoint, the number one thing that's important to us is our employee engagement survey. We do an annual employee engagement survey, and that tells us what's going on. Are we hitting the mark? Are we not? Are all of the initiatives we're doing, do they work? But it's great to survey people, but then what are we going to do with it? So, and this is actually something my father started, but we've taken forward. We share the results with everyone. It's not a secret, good or bad. um, so, in some areas we're better than others, but we take the results forward and share them throughout. And then each business area, each department gets together and determines what they're going to do based on that feedback. So, for example, our employee newsletter came out of this. We weren't communicating well. We didn't understand why. We didn't understand how to fix it. But what bubbled up was we would like a newsletter, a better newsletter that we had kind of regional communication and just something all that rolled up. And then our HR team has the burden of it of compiling those ideas and then identifying which ones the senior leadership team is going to take forward. Again, the employee newsletter being one of them, to make sure that we fund it, we resource it, and we get it over the finish line. And then there's small things that other people do. One of the other things that came out of this was an employee engagement team. We have a corporate employee engagement team, and that's the other place that we can measure how we're doing. It's much more, it's qualitative measurement as opposed to quantitative measurement in the employee engagement survey. But that's a cross-functional group. It's a cross-departmental, it's a cross-location, and they meet virtually, probably quarterly, maybe monthly, a little bit more often. And they're putting together initiatives. Right now, we're doing a diaper drive. Something we started a number of years ago, actually, to celebrate my twin's birthday. I wanted to do one personally and said, hey, let's bring the business along. This is part of the blend thing, that this is something we can share our passions and our curiosities with our business. But so we're in the middle of a diaper drive, and there's an engagement leader at each location that then is going to push that out and lead the drive. Some locations, it's not their thing. That's okay. Not everything has to be their thing, but in others it is. And so they get really excited and can really, we get great feedback from that. We started celebrating our anniversary every year. This is 100% driven by the employee engagement team. And every year, every branch gets a cake that says, hey, happy birthday to us. Let's celebrate. And so just some little things like that. But based on what I look at as sitting in my seat, how active is that team? If that team's not planning anything, we're probably not doing a very good job in our balance and our engagement in what's happening. If they're planning a bunch of stuff and people are excited and our social media is blowing up, we're probably doing okay. It's a little bit of a sniff test, so to speak. But this survey really gives us those quantitative results, and then we can use those for the year.
Interesting. Now, I'm going to dig into a little bit on that employee engagement survey. I love employee engagement surveys. Um, Obviously, with so many different locations, you probably have a relatively big variance in terms of location by location and department by department. Are you looking at that employee engagement number as a single number, or is it, here's your department's engagement number?
Anyone who has more than 5 employees gets their own survey.
Hmm.
So in those branches where we only have one person, because then and that's to protect their anonymity
Right.
in the results. So they would roll into their closest branch. And so for example, then their number would be for that branch's number, but still relevant. And honestly, some of those results are hard to deliver. When I was in charge of a division of the business, I had some managers that I thought were really good managers that did not get good feedback. And that was a tough conversation to sit down and had to say, how do you want to handle it? How do we want to, because then they have to go and deliver that news to their team. And can be a raw conversation. But what should come out of that then is, why do we think this happened? And what, again, are the tools and resources we have that can help us change it? We use the caliper assessment as a hiring tool, but it's also a coaching and development tool. So I remember on one occasion when we had a pretty tough team engagement score, we did a team caliper. And what we realized was they were speaking two different languages. The manager was kind of upper right quadrant and their team was lower left, like to a T. And they just weren't hearing each other. But once they had the awareness and knowledge of, hey, we're not hearing each other. We all want what's best for everyone, but we got to communicate with each other differently. That was a really helpful thing to help them figure out how to change their engagement, change the dynamic they had between each other. Um, so that's a lot of how we've approached that.
Interesting. And for anybody listening, caliper assessment, maybe you can talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so there's a lot of different types of assessments, and of course I'm blanking on some of the other ones that but a lot of people use it as a hiring tool. And what it does is about a 20-minute test, so to speak, but I should say assessment. It's a 20-minute assessment that really just identifies your tendencies. And what we do is we create profiles. So we say our best outside salesperson has these attributes. How does this candidate for an outside salesperson stack up against these attributes? Urgency, ability to take feedback, and all those kinds of things. Urgency, again, maybe really important in an outside salesperson, maybe less important in other roles. So it's not that we're looking for someone to score high. In order to be hired, we're looking for their tendencies. And then that's how we can use it as a coaching tool. And I use it so much. I go back and say, okay, you're having a hard time with this person. They don't seem to be following through on their tasks. Well, what's their caliper say about their urgency? Oh, it's really low. Well, this is just who they are. How can, again, we help them with the tools and resources to get better or have self-awareness about this tendency that they have?
Absolutely. I've got a comment in the chat. Somebody saying, your employee newsletter sounds like a great idea and employee engagement teams as opposed to force fun.
Yeah,
I don't know, Katie. Cake sounds like forced fun to me, but
we've got some forced fun out there too, but that's yeah, and the newsletter, it's all online. We print it out at some locations, especially for our drivers aren't always in front of a computer or in front of their email, so it's printed out so they can read it. Someone in the senior leadership team writes an article about a topic. It can be anything, or something that's really urgently going on at the business. We highlight birthdays, anniversaries, the top salespeople, top performers, all those KPIs that drive the business. We highlight those. We talk about what the employee engagement team is doing. We also highlight open jobs. Someone who is maybe looking to expand their career someplace else, or maybe somebody who knows somebody that can fill a role. So it's not a lot of content that has to be developed by anybody, just kind of pulled together. And a lot of it probably already exists in the business.
all right. Maybe you could share some data or stories about the effectiveness of these programs. And I'll let you decide what programs that you want to share. But I love hearing about the specifics of programs and how effective they are or aren't. We can learn things from that as well.
Yeah, kind of getting back to the work life piece. There's McKinsey, you're probably very familiar, and puts out a study with leanin.org every year about women in the workplace. And it's something I devour every year. I usually end up talking about it in various organizations. But to me, and over the course of their studies, they've seen a lot of patterns and trends about, okay, how work-life balance affecting the workplace, how is it helping people? And I wrote down the statistics so I wouldn't forget it, but because men are promoted faster than women, often 60% of manager positions are still held by men, whereas only 40% of positions are held by women. The flip side of that statistic is in their latest study, kind of coming out of COVID, they found that work-life balance is just as important to men as it is to women. There's no outsized importance to women. Women do end up often in the caretaking role. Again, whether it's a parent or whether it's a child or whether it's anything else. However, that importance is equal amongst men and women. So how are we able to create programs that don't cater towards one group or the other? And then how do we ensure that business treats the programs as not catered to one group or the other. This isn't about moms being able to work part-time, right? Like that's the horrible, that's the worst case scenario if that's what we think the program that we think we're building. And so the story I would tell around that is we had a controller who had a young family, and he actually raised his hand and said, "We don't have a paternity leave policy." He's in a leadership role in our business and raised his hand. And this was a number of years ago. So my father was still in the role. And he's like, "Of course we don't. We don't need one." And there, our senior leadership team kind of got around, and some people were in his camp, and I didn't have children yet, but I was kind of looking at our controller. It's like, we do got a generational difference too, where our emerging generation, our generation emerging in the leadership, found this to be really important. And not only that, but as leaders of this company, that's who we wanted the company to be. It wasn't that my father or anyone else, was doing anything wrong or was taking our company in a direction that didn't make sense. But generationally, that became a priority for us. So say we have a paternity leave policy, and many people are benefited by it. So that sort of data / stories / meandering path of how we can use some of this data and our experiences and stack them. There's almost that habit stacking and our ability to stack these things up so that they can really build the culture of the business we want to live.
Nice. Maybe let's address some misconceptions. Like, do you have some feelings about the kind of biggest misconceptions about work-life balance in leadership circles in particular?
I kind of let the cat out of the bag. It's for moms.
This one.
People think work-life balance is about a mom being able to pick up her kids after school. And that's the biggest misconception, I think. And yeah, there's a segment of that, and that's a moment in time in anyone's career. I mean, you only have to pick up kids from school for 12-ish years, and then all of a sudden, okay, then what does the balance become? And I think there's a lot of work being done and a lot of conversation being had about wellness, and not only mental wellness and mental health, but just our wellness in general. Is it the right thing to be working 60 hours a week, no matter whether we have caregiving duties or not? Or are we better, more productive team members if we have time outside the office as well to pursue the hobbies that we love and build our passions? That's where I think the blend part can become really magical. I mentioned the diaper drive, but that's just me and what's important to me. When I was visiting our locations, one of my favorite days up in Rhinelander, the branch had been unfortunately impacted by breast cancer by a couple of team members. And they realized I was going to be visiting during the month of October. And they said, "Can we make this about breast cancer awareness and make a donation? We'll collect donations and bring the fire department in and present them a check." Amazing. So much fun. The branch had so much fun. And it was a passion that they had, and they found a way for the to make the business better because we could participate in their passion. It wasn't something they had to do after work, after 5 o'clock. It was something that we could blend together. So that's just again one story or example, but and a place where we can change the misconception. I think most people won't think about that as work-life balance, but it is. And so I think when we have a more expansive view of what that means to it, the biggest thing, my husband's a sociologist, so I have a lot of words, but gender norms is the biggest thing, right? That's changing, and I've already given some examples about that. It's important that both genders have access to work-life balance in the same way.
Absolutely. And again, for our audience, if you have a question for Katie about how she's running her business, this is a best case, best winner of the woman-led top workplaces, award winner. Got one right here to answer your questions. If you want to drop a question into the Q&A function, super helpful. Meanwhile, Katie, if you could change one thing about how workplaces overall approach work-life balance, any thoughts about that? What would it be?
Um, I wish it wasn't an all or nothing approach. Either you have a formal policy or you don't. And I think it can be, like I talked about, the incremental change every day that makes a difference. And it can start small. It doesn't have to be a big formal thing, and it shouldn't be just from the desk of the CEO or just from the desk of the VP HR. It can build anywhere. It was my controller who raised his hand and said, "Hey, have you thought about this policy?" And like I shared already, it started small and we've built upon it over time. And that is a policy, a formal policy, but sometimes it can be as simple as just being kind to each other. If you know that your team members returning back from a maternity leave and they're a couple minutes late in the morning, they're trying to figure out how this daycare thing works and they're just a little hurried, and they get in, you say, "Can I grab you a cup of coffee quick? Just sit down for a minute and I'll go grab you a cup of coffee." Just little tiny things like that changes somebody's day, right? Like maybe they were hurried coming in and that just helped them reset. That just helped them think, I can do this. I can be back at work. People care about me and my well-being being here and my well-being outside the office. So we like to think of it in terms of these big policies, but the culture that is created behind them is what makes the difference. Everybody can have a policy, but not everybody can live it in the same.
No. I want to take a little kind of bit of a detour in this conversation. There is a lot happening in the US these days in terms of regulation, policies, tariffs. I mean, you have got so much going on in your space just with all of the conversations around tariffs lately. Like, how are you balancing your need to run your business and have excellent policies for your company with the need to pay attention to what's happening in the world on a global level? How are you balancing that?
Yeah. So a lot of things. Number one, knowledge is power, right? Like be informed. And my daughter over the weekend had she for some reason the books that we got at the library this weekend were all about endangered species, and she had this horrible realization that sharks are endangered. She looks at me with a little 5-year-old eyes. How are we gonna save the shark? Don't worry, we got this, Francis. But number one is I told her learn about them because and tell your friends to learn about them because we can't save something we don't know about. And same viewpoint as tariffs, right? That's the whole spectrum. Save the sharks, know about tariffs. But really my my goal is to just know what's going on. I read the Wall Street Journal every morning, and usually flip through it at night, which I know you're not really supposed to do, but we got to do what we got to do. Because it'll give me the nuggets of information I need, and then I can dive deeper into other things. And then I use my resources. I've talked about that a lot today. Making sure I know what my top 5 vendors are doing. I had either lunch or coffee with my top 3 vendors in the last week to understand what's your approach going to be. What are you thinking? What can I do to respond? And then keep in touch. Tell me if there's something you say, hey, I think you should do this. Well, I think this should be part of your plan. I might not do it. I've got to make my own decision. I'm not going to do what you say, and you shouldn't feel like you have to tell me what to do. But together we can make a plan that's going to be way more impactful. We're trying not to box shadows. We're not going to respond to things that don't exist. And that's part of the hard part about what's going on right now is things are happening so fast and then changing so fast that you can barely make a plan. But what we can do again is to be informed, and then also same goes with the shark story. I told Francis learn about the sharks. In the book we read last night right before bed, actually I was so excited about it. It said, tell your representatives that this is important to you. And again, she looks at me and she goes, are our representatives going to think this is important? I don't know. Let's tell them. She said, is our representative nice? Yes, they're very nice. I've met them, which goes back to being important, like be engaged, be involved in what's going on in the area, because then you do already have an open door to say this is important to us. So one of the things we did, we happened to have a fly-in going on for our state chamber of commerce, and our director of sales went out and he actually got to sit in on a White House briefing and share the impact to our business of what these tariffs were going to be. Could he change opinions? Who knows? But at least he was able to inform somebody else and share the importance to us. So yeah, being informed and using our voice has been critically important. And we're gonna have to respond just like everybody else. But we all learned a lot during COVID and the supply chain crisis about what our capabilities were. And I think back to some of those days and the lessons learned.
Absolutely. We do have a question from the audience. Hope says, I love your idea of incremental changes. However, for corporations with many employees and levels of management, the discrepancy in communication, timing, style, etc., can cause confusion and anxiety. What's your approach to ensure incremental changes are not viewed as chaos?
Back to the communication piece. And that's where our senior leadership meetings became so important because we had some people doing awesome things for their teams and taking care of them. And then somebody in another branch would hear about that and go, well, what about me? How come my manager's not doing that for me? It almost worked in reverse, where good, no good deed goes unpunished kind of thing, unfortunately. But if we could just share some of those best practices and then bring our teams along with how why we're doing this way or why we're doing it that way. And again, going back to the KPIs, are you in an underperforming branch? Not to say you don't deserve things, but maybe this branch got to go bowling for their engagement activity because they're in our top 3 profitable branches. And that was a privilege that they had. What can we do to make your branch one of the top 3 profitable branches so that next year that's you out bowling or whatever it may be. So making sure the context is right, um, and then sharing those best practices.
Excellent. All right. We are starting to head into our final few minutes together. And Katie, one of the things I love to ask people is like, all right, our audience is often other women entrepreneurs. You have a superpower. What is your superpower and what would you use from that superpower or your knowledge to aid and abet other women founders? Like, what is the one thing that you are excellent, super good at with your business, and what can other people learn from that?
So, my best friend jokes to me, and it's true in my family. She says she's like, your father is the exact same. She's like, you guys have 2 extra hours in every day. I don't know how you get these things accomplished. The only way is you have 2 extra hours in the day, and obviously we don't have 2 extra hours in the day, but um, we find ways to be hyper efficient with our time. And one of the things I think back when she said that to me, I was like, oh, I know what you're talking about. When my twins were babies, I had a uniform. I would organize my closet so I had 5 options, wore those same 5 options, and I got ready once every day. I never, on a Sunday, I never came down in my pajamas. I had one opportunity. It was like, I'm going to get ready for my day, and this is who I am for the day, and this is what I'm putting on. But that saved me probably a half hour on either end, right? Where I wasn't going back upstairs after having my coffee and getting ready for the day. It was ready once. And I wasn't worried about what I was going to wear because I already knew that's what was going to happen. Those are 2 very superficial things, but the little things that save time and brain space. My brain doesn't have enough time to think that hard about those things, but I find I can do that everywhere. Um, Preparing for today. I try to do things only once. So I was going to wait until I had time to fully think about the messages I want to send and the conversation we were going to have, and then prepare for that and then put it away and pick it back up, before our conversation rather than pick it up and put it down 100 times. And then the other side of that is the ability to multitask. I don't know. I don't know. The only way I think I get it is by keep practicing, which people say that you can't actually multitask. But I think there are ways to be efficient about our time. It's efficiency, my superpower. It's a boring one, but
Excellent.
for a tax attorney, it makes sense.
It absolutely does. And I'm a big fan of the uniform for work. Everything I own is black with some other extra colors thrown in. Black always matches.
Always.
Yeah. So those are those little efficiencies that help you get a little bit more done in your day, even if that extra 5 minutes or whatever is all that you've got.
You think
All
about
right.
key leaders in the past, Steve Jobs had a uniform, and you think about those visionary people, they maybe weren't all that different than anybody else, except that they had the time and space to think differently than we did. And how did they create it?
Yeah, absolutely. Any last tips for our audience today?
The only thing we didn't talk about that I wanted to mention
Mm.
was in creating work-life balance and in creating a strong women-led culture's career advancement and the investments that we've made in some of our young developing leaders by having some programs and policies to support them. We found a lot of power in that from a retention standpoint and our ability to know who those key performers are and those high potential people, and then how we can especially make sure that they have the time and space for the balance that they blend they need in their lives. That's taught us a lot because they're willing to bring forward some ideas and think differently. Some of these policies have come from that group, so don't sleep on the career advancement and development of your teams when thinking about this topic.
Oh, excellent point. Excellent points. All right. On that note, thank you so much for joining us today and incredibly appreciate the time that we've had with one of our winners of the top places to work, women led companies. And I appreciate everyone joining us. I hope that you will also join us for some of our other programs going forward. And we do have a number of those other programs scheduled over the next few months. We have one scheduled for March 18th, another one for April 14th, and those links are being added to the chat if you missed it earlier. So these two programs, this was the first one, and we have two additional ones in partnership with the Top Workplaces organization. And we will also be collecting more information. So if you are interested in the Top Workplaces program, check it out. If your company is a woman led company, maybe you can be here next year. And of course, Lioness Magazine, our podcasting edition, networking event in early March, and our upcoming webinar related to sales, the art of selling anything, the end of this month. And if you're interested, join our community of female entrepreneurs, network with other women entrepreneurs, learn from other women entrepreneurs. We welcome you to join us. So, Innovation Women is the owner of Lioness Magazine, and we do have programs through Innovation Women as well. Upcoming event next week, February 19th, Mastering Marketing and Personal Branding Strategies for Growing a Seven-Figure Business with Stephanie Carton. And if you are interested in Innovation Women and public speaking, talk to us, innovationwomen.com. And once again, thank you so much, Katie, for joining us today. And we appreciate learning more about how you're running your company. Thank you to everyone for joining us. Thank you, Katie. And we'll see you very soon.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.